This three-bean casserole is dumb.
Scooby-Doo-bop-biddy-bop-bop-bop. I'm so sorry, babe. I hadn't tasted him yet.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Looking forward to, you know.
Don't talk about the ingredients. I know. Yeah.
After, it's just a surprise for your mouth.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time for another comic book review. Today we're going to be talking about DC Black Label's Batman Reptilian from just a dream creative team, at least in my perspective. You got Garth Enis, Liam Sharp. Interesting take on the character. This is definitely a highly recommend, but it's almost all on the back of Liam Sharp. Normally, I'm an enormous fan of his comic book illustration, specifically his pencil work is just, it's like otherworldly. When you look at Liam Sharp's pencil work, it's amazing how he's almost flown under the radar, not really appreciated as one of the true masters as far as comic artists in today's landscape. The amount of detail he's able to get into his comic books with some of the crazy concepts and ideas, but you can tell he really has an understanding of visual storytelling, how to keep the eye moving, all that stuff. And I really appreciate that. Here, we get a different Liam Sharp. This is a painted comic. Has a different feel to it. It really accentuates the character of Batman, really accentuates the character of Gotham City. It's fantastic. It's a little bit light on story. I am glad that we do get some detective work from Batman in here. And it's definitely a different interpretation of Batman. Of course, this is Black Label, which if we're going by when it was announced, it's kind of Elseworlds. But is there Elseworlds in the DC Omniverse? I don't even know. But this is definitely not your grandpappy's Batman. This is a different take, a little bit more intense, potentially more dangerous. Yeah, hey, Garth Enis is probably best known for his work on Punisher. If you've never read Punisher Max, you missed out. That's one of the truly great comic runs I've ever read in my life. So his Batman is a little bit more hard-hitting, more in the vein of some of the stuff we've seen maybe in Dark Knight Returns, maybe some of the Frank Miller stuff. If you don't know Liam Sharp and you want to see a great book that he wrote and illustrated, go read Batman and Wonder Woman Brave and Bold. One of the most beautifully illustrated comics you'll ever read in your life. He also just finished up his run on Green Lantern with Grant Morrison. Not my favorite, but it looked like dynamite. So this is a really good pairing and a different take on Batman. Exciting stuff here. Like I said, definitely highly recommend this. 4 stars, almost all on the back of Liam Sharp. Not that the writing's bad, but it hasn't picked up the pace quite yet. There's also a pretty nice dedication from Liam Sharp to Steve Dillon in here. Steve Dillon was a longtime collaborator of Garth Enis. He worked on Preacher, Hellblazer, Punisher, some other projects like that. Died suddenly several years back. I think it was complications from, appendicitis, which is crazy because I had that when I first got here. When I had my channel, and my appendix ruptured as well. So pretty crazy stuff. And this is what Liam had to say. For Steve Dillon, a big brother to many of us, the script to this book was meant for him, and I would rather have him here by far than be drawing it myself. I'm doing my best to make him proud, but that said, I can feel him over my shoulder chuckling a little, saying, "No, mate, you do you. Shame to waste it." So there you go. I thought that was just a nice little reminder of who Steve Dillon was and what he meant, pretty much to Garth Enis, but not only him, but to Liam Sharp, the artist as well. Without further ado, let's get into this art. I got to talk about it. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. There's a definite tone and feel to this comic book that is both dark and ominous. We get to see several facets of kind of the Batman universe, and Liam Sharp's and Garth Enis' interpretation of that in this visual form. It is magnificent. It is a sight to behold. Once you're done reading this comic, you should go back and just look at the pictures again and read it without the words. There's so much to take in. Sharp does this really cool thing where there's a lot of kind of photorealistic imagery in here, specifically people, maybe the inside of bars and everything, but he also interconnects it with abstract art as well. It's done very well and fascinating, in my opinion. We'll kind of get to that here in a bit, but just some of the shots of Gotham City, you could just see what a foe Gotham City is in and of itself to Batman. It just, urban landscape just falling in on itself. It's so dirty, decrepit, you could never escape it. And I just really appreciate the craftsmanship that Liam Sharp put into when he's giving us these images of Gotham. There's only a few of them in here, but when he does, it's just really gets the look and feel. It's so dark and foreboding. As I mentioned, when Batman's like in bars or talking to people, they look very photorealistic. But when they're showing the Batman himself, it's insane. He is the most frightening character in the entire book. If you were to read the book without the words, you would think Batman was the villain. Do you remember that scene in, I think it's Batman Begins, where Scarecrow uses his gas, but he gets gassed himself and he sees what Batman looks like, through the Scarecrow toxin, with that, in his veins. And he looks like the most disgusting, scary demon you've ever seen. That's kind of what Batman looks like most of the time in this comic book. It's shocking. He absolutely looks more terrifying, more intimidating, deadlier, and more foreboding than any villain in this comic book. And it's crazy. Whenever he's talking to a human, they look vulnerable. Even though in the case of the center panel that I'm showing here, that man is the bad guy. He's like a heavyweight boxing champion that I believe he was accused of beating and raping a couple of women. They got off because the judge didn't like Batman's evidence or something. That's like the opening part of the comic book. But this guy is essentially a scumbag. And he looks like the victim when he's side by side with Batman. Just a fascinating take by Liam Sharp and Garth Enis when they're showing Batman as the hero. He doesn't feel like the hero. He feels like the villain. He absolutely looks like the villain. And then when they actually show the villains, and we don't see them a whole lot within this comic book, but we do see the Rogues Gallery at the end. They're amped up to even crazier levels. They're like carny folk. And it's just a really interesting contrast between the humans living, like what looks to be the humans living in Gotham, and the villains. They're not human anymore. They're just straight up monsters when you're reading this comic book and you're looking at the images. And I also thought it was cool when you see Two-Face there, like the human half of him looks normal, but the disfigured half looks very sinister. And then if you see like Poison Ivy, she almost looks a little bit more human. Like maybe she's not quite as evil as Joker here. And you see Scarecrow and Clayface and Killer Croc. Just really, really interesting stuff that Liam Sharp is telling you through his artwork and his artistry in this comic book. This is 5-star art. Do I want every comic book to be illustrated like this? Absolutely not. I prefer pencil and inks almost all the time. But if you're going to do one of these big prestige books on something insane by Garth Enis, you got Liam Sharp, do something different. This almost feels like Batman Damned, but it's amped up and it's definitely got its own unique feel to it. And I would say Liam Sharp absolutely knocked it out of the park. I'm going to have to read this 2 or 3 more times just to take it all in. There's so much going on everywhere. Liam Sharp, my goodness, this is a masterpiece. Now let's get into the comic book itself and the writing from Garth Enis. It's good. It's just not great. It's kind of a typical modern day comic book where the first issue you get a scene that has almost nothing to do with the rest of the book, just so you have a little bit of action. In this case, it's not really even action. It's kind of just giving you a feel for this new version of Batman, this version that Garth Enis is getting you to know. And then it's kind of a lot of talking and sorting things out as they're laying the foundation with the groundwork for the adventure to come. Not my favorite way to write. I almost prefer the Chuck Dixon start in the action, give you flashbacks to the stuff that happened beforehand, in the middle of it, and get things going, get the reader's heart pounding. You know what I mean? That is not the direction Garth Enis chose to take. And this is definitely a different version of Batman. As I said, just visually exceptionally menacing, very intimidating, looks like a villain. He's also, I don't know, Batman certainly speaks, but this one feels a little bit more verbose. In the very opening scene where we have this heavyweight champion walking out of the courthouse after he's been quote unquote exonerated because the evidence that Batman had collected was thrown out on a technicality, and his lawyer is kind of hamming it up with the press and getting their photo op or whatever. Like, I get what Batman's doing here, but he's almost like talking to hear himself speak so he can get on camera or something. That's not really something I've ever really associated with Batman, but really what he's doing is he's trying to coerce this enormous man into making a move. Because he's gotten away. Batman obviously is not very happy with him. He knows he's not going to admit that he's a rapist, and he's beating women and everything. So he's kind of goading him into a conflict. He does finally take a swing. We don't see the outcome of this, but it's certainly hinted at within the words that potentially Batman has paralyzed this man afterwards in self-defense. Or perhaps he's just in a wheelchair for a while after their encounter. So it's a little bit different take on Batman. And it almost feels like in public, Batman wants people to hear him speak, which is odd. You don't really get that from Batman anywhere else. Like, you don't think of Batman jumping up in front of the cameras on the nightly news and delivering a speech. We don't see a lot of Bruce Wayne in this comic book, and it certainly feels like there are two different characters here. We do get him in the Batcave a little bit, and he has a conversation with Alfred. I don't know. Their relationship feels off. They don't feel exceptionally close. It doesn't feel like Bruce appreciates Alfred or even his advice or maybe his support that he gives him. So I imagine this will be fleshed out further. As I mentioned a few seconds ago, it's not like there's a ton of things happening in the Batcave. You get a few glimpses of Bruce Wayne and Alfred, and then he's off to being Batman again. There's one curious line where he's going out to investigate some things that I'm going to talk about here in a second. And Alfred's like, well, what do you want to do tomorrow? You have all the underprivileged kids are coming in and you're supposed to be meeting them. He's like, well, you can replace me. You can stand in for me, Alfred. It kind of felt out of character. I mean, I guess it's in character to be putting himself out there, but also Bruce Wayne does a lot of work with children. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. I imagine he's laying the groundwork. I've read enough Garth Enis to know that he doesn't put a lot of superfluous information and scenes into his comic books. So I'm waiting for this to play out a little bit more. As a man who did the most intense Punisher storylines in the history of the world, you imagine his take on Batman is going to be a little bit different. And we definitely get a taste of that later on. He's got this guy, he's like a Russian mafia guy that's working for, I think it's Scarecrow. And he's almost using, because Batman never kills, I'll never kill you. Haven't you realized yet? I'm far worse than the multicolored rabble talking about the villains. I will not let you die. Almost like him not letting him die is the punishment. He will put him through this and this and this. And kind of taking, I don't know, some people would say that would be Batman's greatest weakness, right? He won't kill the Joker. He won't kill villains. And he's kind of flipping it on its head to where it's a threat. You're going to wish I killed you by the time I'm done with you. He's almost like using his physical size and presence to intimidate the man to where he almost walks off the ledge, killing himself kind of thing. When I saw Garth Enis was going to be doing a Batman book, we knew he was going to be a different take on Batman. But this version of Batman definitely likes to use the theatrics. He likes to use his physical size and intimidation, and he likes to threaten people with the fact that he won't kill them. It's not the greatest plot in the world. When Bruce is in the Batcave with Alfred, he's kind of checking 911 calls, and he sees something as he's in the middle of a conversation with Alfred. And apparently, the Scarecrow and Mad Hatter were found together, assaulted, and in the words of, I guess, the 911 operator or whoever called it in, gutted, in fact. And this kind of sets off our tale of adventure. What's interesting also here is we never see this reptilian, whether it's Killer Croc or whatever character this is going to be. You never see that. This is just the introduction, and he does go off to do a bit of detective work. I definitely appreciate that. He goes down. He knows where Scarecrow's like number 2 guy is. He's in this, or he's normally in this bar. He goes down to the bar to find the guy. The guy's not there. He intimidates the guys in the bar and he tells them, meet me on this rooftop, in 2 hours. He goes up there and meets him, and he gets this story that had happened apparently before this, to where the Mad Hatter and Scarecrow were kind of working together, and they heard that the Riddler and Penguin were doing something together. So they decided they were going to hit him first. They go in to do something, maybe kill these guys, and they find him dead. And I guess the Riddler's been split, quote, from his chest to his crotch. They also say that the Penguin himself is like, can you be impaled on a ceiling? I don't know. He was stuck to it. Let's just put it that way. They were both dead, and he calls it a bloodbath. So there's somebody out there that's taking down these crime lords, these villains in Gotham City. So far, we've got Riddler, Penguin, Mad Hatter, and Scarecrow are all off the table and been murdered by somebody. And Batman needs information. So what he ends up doing by using those threats of "I will not kill you" and his his general size and demonic presentation to intimidate this Russian outfit character that worked for Scarecrow. He's dead now, and he says you're going undercover, and he pressures him to join up with the Joker's gang so he can understand what's going on and have some eyes and ears on the inside. And that's kind of where we leave off. Although there's a cliffhanger that insinuates that this Russian guy might be in some trouble, but it's only insinuated. I guess you could also take it that he's having nightmares. You're not really sure what the end means. There's another mystery that's presented in this story. I guess this ex-Russian mob guy that's working for Scarecrow, he was going to these meetings, and it was essentially, it sounds like it was called by Joker himself, where all the big Rogues Gallery members would show up and they would have meetings. And a lot of times they would talk about what they were going to do to Batman, their schemes and plots to kill the Dark Knight. And I guess in the last meeting, something happened. When they got there, almost immediately, everyone started losing their minds and they started fighting. I guess he pulls out an Uzi. He's going to shoot, Joe Kelly, slow Joe Kelly. And all these things are happening, and all of a sudden everyone gets amped up and they're going to kill each other, and then it just goes away. It feels like that would be something maybe that would come from Scarecrow. I'm not sure. There's some type of toxin or something that is coerced these criminals while they were in this meeting to want to kill each other. And it really raised up the tensions between all the crime lords and the Rogues Gallery of Batman. So we do have that mystery that's underlying as well. Not just who killed Riddler, Penguin, Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, but what happened at this meeting. And I imagine that eventually they're all going to be interconnected. Not the most brisk story of all times, as I mentioned earlier, but it is intriguing, and it's the art, though. It's just the art really sells this story. And if I'm being honest, there have been a couple of clunkers that I've read from Garth Enis in the past. Not a whole lot of them. Specifically, his Punisher stuff is unreal how good it is. My only worry is that there are similarities between Punisher and Batman, but there are clear dividing lines that keep them from. You could never have Batman go as far as the Punisher. You know what I mean? And since you have the definitive Punisher writer, is he going to do that with Batman? And if he does, will it be a bad thing? I'm not sure. It is Black Label. That is my spoiler review. I really enjoyed Batman Reptilian. 4-star comic, highly recommend. On the back of the work of Liam Sharp, who absolutely destroys it, this comic. If you are a writer-driven reader who could care less about the visuals, this might not be the comic for you, although I do think you'll probably still enjoy it. If you are an artist-driven reader who doesn't need the strongest story in the history of the world, this might very well be a 5-star comic for you. This might be perfect. The story is perfectly adequate, but the art and the visuals and the visual storytelling by Liam Sharp are otherworldly here. This is probably the best illustrated comic I've seen this year. I think so. I'm going to have to think about that one, but this definitely goes on my list. The visuals in this are so strong, and I imagine, knowing Liam Sharp's reputation and reading him in the past, that he will keep up his end of the bargain for all 6 issues of this DC Black Label miniseries. We have no idea who Reptilian is. If you read this comic, you don't even know what that's referring to, because there's one image of Killer Croc in this, but it seems like he's just part of that meeting. Oh, and I also got to say, that cover, despite being done by Liam Sharp, is absolute buttholes. Why would you homage the Godzilla poster, the most reviled and hated Godzilla movie of all times? I don't get it. I mean, it looks cool enough, kind of. If you're that confident in the interior of your comic book, you're just like, listen, I don't even need a cover that sells this book. It felt like that was their take on it. And I looked at the alternates, and they weren't all that much better. They were just kind of strange. Although the Bill Sienkiewicz one was okay. But it included a character that you don't see. You see a scene with like Killer Croc or whoever this Reptilian is, like choking out Batman. There ain't nothing even close to that happening in this comic book. I guess I'll stop ranting about covers. This is a good comic book, especially if you like the visuals. My goodness, is it a treat. Definitely worth your money. The visuals alone are worth your money and then some. And I will see you later for more comic reviews. Tomorrow I'm going to be reviewing Infinite Frontier #1, first thing in the morning. And on Thursday, first thing, I'm going to be reviewing Spawn's Universe #1 as well. And those should be my 3 reviews this week. I don't plan on reviewing anything else. If something awesome happens or something terrible happens, maybe I'll cover those. But those are the 3 comics you can expect this week. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you later.